mayor is getting national attention for the way that she's spending taxpayer dollars. So she's now accused of spending tens of thousands of taxpayer funds on self-voting billboards, as well as putting her name on government buildings. Government agent in our public buildings to have meetings. Why are meetings being canceled? Why can't we have transfer?
In Dolton, things have spiraled out of control with Tiffany Henyard at the center of a growing scandal. The town's trustees have intensified their pursuit of Henyard following serious accusations of financial misconduct. Henyard is accused of misappropriating funds that were entrusted to her for community development, instead using them for her benefit. Recent reports indicate that the FBI has frozen her bank accounts and is planning to seize her assets. Underscoring the severity of the accusations depict a troubling pattern of financial mismanagement. Henyard is alleged to have used public funds to hire a costly security team, prioritizing her safety over the well-being of the community she was supposed to serve. This wasteful spending has sparked outrage among Dolton residents, as the money was meant to improve local infrastructure. But this was just the beginning. Sources claim that Henyard spent large sums on flashy billboards promoting her image around town, all paid for with taxpayer money. These ads served no purpose other than personal promotion, diverting funds that could have been used for essential projects. On top of this, Henyard's extravagant daily shopping habits are said to have cost the town thousands of dollars. As more details emerge, residents are questioning the motives of someone they once trusted with their financial contributions. The scale of the alleged wrongdoing has left Dolton residents shocked and disillusioned. The betrayal of trust by a leader who was supposed to work in their best interest is hard to comprehend. As evidence against Henyard mounts and the pressure from authorities grows, it seems her fate is sealed. Not only is she under investigation by local officials, but federal investigators are now involved in the case. The trustees of Dolton are unwavering in their commitment to seeking justice, while the community stands united in demanding accountability. Anger and frustration are palpable in the town, as people come to grips with the realization that their trust has been broken. This scandal has raised difficult questions about how such misconduct went unnoticed for so long, and whether Henyard will face any real consequences. The road to recovery for Dolton will be long and challenging. Rebuilding the community's trust and leadership will take time, and the damage caused by Henyard's alleged actions will leave a lasting impact. After such a deep betrayal, the people of Dolton are left wondering if they will ever be able to restore the integrity of their leadership.
And your calendar, which includes the super mayor's birthday. You can't forget that. She could be proud of this result, given that her salary for the two jobs is nearly $300,000. More than the state's governor, by the way. But it's all on the taxpayer side. And this goes beyond signage and merch. Henyard put an ordinance in place that if she lost a future mayoral election, the next mayor's salary would be dropped from $200,000 to $25,000. But if she wins...
There is growing suspicion in Dolton that Tiffany Henyard's ability to evade justice for so long, and the fact that she is yet to be arrested, may be tied to the potential complicity of certain members of the town's board of trustees. Rumors are circulating that some trustees, who were initially seen as working independently to uncover the truth, may now be entangled in the same corruption. This unsettling development raises the possibility that the problem extends far beyond Henyard herself. As the situation worsens, whispers are spreading that some trustees may have known about her actions, or even benefited from them, adding to the complexity of the case. It is increasingly likely that the effort to catch Henyard may be part of a larger plan to protect a network of corruption that could be exposed if she were to reveal everything she knows as the pressure mounts. Henyard has spent weeks defending herself at town meetings, attempting to hold on to her position and deny the growing accusations. However, the evidence against her continues to pile up, and fewer people in Dolton are willing to support her in the face of ongoing investigations by the trustees. What once appeared to be a case of financial mismanagement is now a tangled web of potential cover-ups and abuse of power. The town's leadership and Henyard's role within it are under intense scrutiny. The investigation into Henyard's finances was initially launched when the trustees requested her financial records, hoping to uncover the full scope of her alleged wrongdoing. However, Henyard reportedly made it exceedingly difficult for them to access these records, throwing up numerous obstacles and using her power and influence to prevent the truth from coming to light. In some cases, it has been alleged that Henyard even tampered with evidence, possibly destroying or altering documents to protect herself and derail the investigation. This ability to manipulate people and obstruct inquiries has only fueled suspicions that she may have powerful allies within the town's leadership, who are eager to keep her in power for their benefit. This suspicion has led many in Dolton to wonder just how deep the corruption runs and who else might be involved. While the trustees initially sought to expose Henyard's actions, it is now becoming clear that they may be trying to distance themselves from her, possibly in an attempt to shield themselves from an expanding scandal. This shift only adds to the growing sense that corruption could be far more widespread than originally believed. What started as a seemingly isolated issue of alleged financial misconduct has now erupted into a full-blown scandal involving potential cover-ups, abuse of power, and a network of deceit that seems to permeate the town's leadership with each passing day. The situation in Dolton grows more chaotic. The public is demanding answers, while Henyard desperately clings to her innocence and her position. Trust in local leadership has been severely damaged, and many are questioning the integrity of the very officials who are supposed to protect the town's well-being. The increasing uncertainty and turmoil indicate that what happens next is far from certain, but one thing is clear. Dolton is on the verge of a reckoning. The truth about what has been happening behind closed doors will soon come to light. Whether Henyard and the trustees like it or not, the ongoing investigation and the tense political climate in Dolton suggests that the situation is far from resolved. The town now faces a long road ahead, not only to restore order, but to rebuild any semblance of trust in its leadership. The scandals that have unfolded have cast a dark shadow over Dolton's future, and residents are anxiously awaiting answers. The community, once united in its support for Henyard, now finds itself grappling with the deep betrayal of those they once trusted. As the investigation continues, it remains to be seen how far the web of corruption extends. But one thing is certain, the town of Dolton will never be the same.
And Dolton has less than 30 police officers. But that room, I only saw 2 police officers. But presumably, whoever was holding the camera is a police officer as well. So
the people of Dolton had reached their breaking point. After months of frustration with Tiffany Henyard's ongoing obstruction of an investigation into her corrupt practices, the community demanded change. In desperation, they turned to Lightfoot, the former mayor of Chicago, known for her no-nonsense leadership and investigative expertise. Lightfoot quickly took charge, digging deep into Henyard's case. What she uncovered was nothing short of alarming, with a vast trove of evidence implicating Henyard in a wide range of illegal activities. The findings were so disturbing that it became clear Henyard was facing serious jail time. However, despite the mounting evidence, she remained free, shielded by a network of powerful allies who continued to protect her from justice. What began as a case of suspected financial mismanagement soon unraveled into something darker and more sinister. Henyard's actions were not just illegal, they were devastating to the lives of Dolton's residents. One of Lightfoot's most significant discoveries was the shocking decline in the town's general fund. When the investigation began, Dolton's general fund had a balance of $5.6 million, more than enough to meet the town's needs. But by May 2024, that balance had plummeted to just $3.65 million, representing a staggering loss of nearly $2 million. This financial decline became the foundation for a deeper inquiry into Henyard's actions, but it was far from the only alarming revelation. Lightfoot's investigation uncovered a series of detailed credit card transactions that pointed directly to Henyard's irresponsible and selfish spending habits. These transactions were linked to a credit card tied to Dolton's public funds, showing that Henyard frequently indulged in extravagant online shopping sprees whenever she was bored. Instead of using the town's money for its intended purposes, Henyard used it to fund her lavish lifestyle. Among the numerous purchases, one stood out on January 5, 2023, when Henyard spent a jaw-dropping $33,000 on Amazon, buying an assortment of goods unrelated to Dolton's needs. But the extravagance didn't stop there. She also made 2 additional purchases on the same day, one for $4,753.14, and another from Wayfair for nearly $7,000 on top of that. Henyard racked up $2,200 at Best Buy and an astounding $12,988 on international vacations. The scale of her spending was beyond belief. It was clear that Henyard had no regard for the financial welfare of Dolton, using its funds in ways that bordered on outright theft. Her behavior wasn't just irresponsible. It was reckless, wasting the very funds meant to improve the town and support its struggling residents. While the community struggled to make ends meet, Henyard lived a life of luxury. Completely indifferent to the suffering around her, Lightfoot's investigation revealed not only the massive scale of Henyard's spending spree, but also the profound and detrimental effects her actions had on Dolton's finances. The people who should have benefited from the funds could barely survive, while Henyard acted as though the money was endless. The idea that someone could spend public funds so carelessly and recklessly, without concern for those who depended on it, was deeply disturbing. As Lightfoot dug deeper, serious questions arose about how Henyard had managed to stay in power for so long despite so many red flags. How had she been able to manipulate the system and avoid accountability for her actions? The answer became clearer as Lightfoot uncovered Henyard's extensive network of allies within Dolton's leadership. It was likely these powerful individuals, possibly even among the trustees, who ensured Henyard's continued impunity, allowing her to operate without consequence despite the mounting evidence and growing outrage from Dolton's residents. Henyard remained free, and the community was left wondering how long she would continue to evade justice. While Lightfoot's investigation unearthed a mountain of evidence, the question remained, how would Henyard's powerful connections ultimately be dismantled? The people of Dolton, already frustrated and distrustful due to Henyard's ongoing protection by influential allies, were further shaken as the full scope of her criminal behavior was exposed. Despite the mounting evidence, Henyard remained shielded from justice, which only deepened the community's anger and disillusionment. As Lightfoot's investigation continued, new revelations piled on, adding to the staggering damage Henyard had caused. Her lavish lifestyle and reckless spending habits were particularly shocking to residents who were enduring severe financial hardship due to her egregious misuse of public funds. While the people of Dolton struggled to make ends meet, Henyard spent the town's money on extravagant shopping sprees, vacations, and personal luxuries. But financial mismanagement was just the beginning. The community was stunned to learn that, as of June 18, 2024, at least 58 checks totaling over $6 million have been authorized and printed but never delivered to the intended vendors. These vendors, who had provided goods and services to the town, were left unpaid, while Henyard arrogantly retained the money for herself. Diverting it to fund her indulgences, this blatant breach of trust was an unforgivable betrayal to the very people she was supposed to serve. The shockwave from this revelation reverberated through Dolton, leaving residents feeling helpless and betrayed. But the investigation didn't stop there. Another disturbing discovery emerged. 2 police officers, believed to be employed by Henyard, had been receiving overtime pay far exceeding their regular salaries. One officer, with a base salary of $87,200 for fiscal year 2024, somehow accumulated an additional $114,800 in overtime. Another officer, with a salary of $73,500, received $122,238 in overtime during the same period. These excessive payouts raised serious questions about Henyard's manipulation of the system, further suggesting that she was using her power not only to misappropriate public funds, but also to distort the town's resources for personal gain. By allowing certain individuals to benefit unjustly, Henyard created a system where only a select few were enriched while the rest of Dolton suffered. This was no longer just a case of financial mismanagement or reckless behavior. It was a direct attack on the integrity of public service and the core values of the community. Henyard had violated the trust of Dolton's residents, people who had entrusted her with their tax dollars to improve the town and serve its needs. Instead, she had used that trust to enrich herself. The magnitude of her misconduct left the city in disbelief, and the community was left grappling with the devastating consequences of her actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Henyard remained protected by powerful figures who continued to shield her from facing the consequences of her actions. The frustration among Dolton's residents grew as they wondered how much longer she could avoid justice. Every day she remained free, deep in the sense of injustice they had endured. While her supporters continued to protect her from accountability, the people of Dolton were resolute in their demand for justice, knowing full well that Henyard's actions had caused irreparable harm to their town. The financial ruin, the betrayal of trust, and the abuse of power were beyond comprehension. The community was united in its call for accountability. They knew that Henyard's corruption had been devastating, and there could be no excuse for the damage she had done to Dolton. The question now was, how much longer would she be able to avoid the consequences of her actions despite the powerful protection she enjoyed? The residents of Dolton had reached their breaking point. They had had enough of her mismanagement, greed, and manipulation of the town's resources. They would not rest until justice was served and the full extent of her corruption was brought to light. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but one thing was certain. The people of Dolton were determined to hold Henyard accountable for the financial devastation and moral decay she had caused in their community. They would see that justice was done, no matter the obstacles in their way.
Thousands of dollars on a week-long walk to promote her self-named cancer charity, which has yet to file required reporting. She spent almost $15,000 for a trip to Vegas, as well as shooting music videos like this online.
The full scope of Tiffany Henyard's financial misconduct left the residents of Dolton in a state of shock and disbelief. The magnitude of her betrayal was palpable as the community realized that she had abused the very public funds they had entrusted to her. These funds, which were meant to benefit the town, had instead been squandered to support Henyard's lavish and reckless lifestyle. Outrage quickly boiled over, with a trustee from Dolton being interviewed by Fox News, expressing deep frustration and calling for immediate action. "I suspected all along that Tiffany needs to be locked up and made an example of," the trustee said, his voice thick with anger. "She cannot just go free. The federal authorities are not letting Tiffany get away with using our money and spending it however she pleases." As if her job included a cash-register, the community was adamant in their demand for justice, insisting that the federal authorities take swift and decisive action to make Henyard an example of what happens to those who abuse the public trust. They wanted to see corruption stamped out, no matter how powerful or connected the perpetrator might be. As the Board of Trustees struggled with the fallout from Henyard's actions, it became increasingly clear that her downfall was imminent. Tiffany had recently been served with 2 separate subpoenas, a clear indication that the authorities were closing in on her. The subpoenas signaled the expansion of the investigation, and many interpreted them as a sign that the net was tightening around Henyard. The FBI, in particular, moved swiftly, freezing her bank accounts and beginning to seize her assets. This step suggested that they were preparing for a major arrest. The second subpoena was particularly damning, as it demanded an extensive range of documents, including personnel files, wage and tax records, time and attendance logs, contracts, checks written to cash, and records related to Henyard's numerous business ventures. These ventures included a restaurant, a property management company, a charity bearing her name, and even a political action committee. All of these indicated that Henyard had been running a sprawling network of personal enterprises that may have been funded by misappropriated public money. The authorities were seeking a comprehensive financial trail, requesting payroll records, budgets, ordinances related to credit card purchases, expense reports, reimbursements, security information, and vehicle usage records. The scope of the investigation was staggering, covering every angle of Henyard's financial activities. What federal investigators uncovered was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence that pointed directly to Henyard's abuse of power and her use of public funds to enrich herself at the expense of Dolton's residents. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Henyard had not yet been arrested, and many speculated that her powerful and influential allies were using their connections to shield her from the law. These connections seemed to be delaying her inevitable downfall, causing further frustration and anger within the community. Yet, the federal authorities were not blind to this. They were determined to ensure they had a solid, indisputable case before making any arrests. This strategy explained the delay in the issuance of 2 subpoenas, as law enforcement wanted to gather every relevant piece of evidence to ensure Henyard could not claim that the investigation was flawed or that she could evade facing consequences. The fact that she had been served with 2 subpoenas spoke to the thoroughness of the investigation. Authorities were leaving no stone unturned, covering all angles, ensuring that when the time came for Henyard to be arrested, the case would be so airtight that her guilt would be undeniable. For the residents of Dolton, the growing realization that justice was moving slowly but surely in their favor was bittersweet. They had waited long enough to see Henyard held accountable for her actions, and while it was frustrating to see her remain free for the time being, the evidence against her was so overwhelming that there was little doubt she would eventually face the consequences of her actions. The community's faith in the justice system was being tested. But the residents found hope in knowing that authorities were being careful and thorough. With the overwhelming nature of the evidence, there was little chance Henyard would avoid justice. In the meantime, Dolton's residents anxiously awaited the moment when Henyard would no longer be able to hide behind her powerful connections. They eagerly anticipated the day when she would be forced to answer for the damage she had caused to their town and the suffering she had inflicted on its residents. That day could not come soon enough. During a recent meeting of Dolton's Board of Trustees, another shocking development emerged from the ongoing federal investigation into Tiffany Henyard's financial misconduct. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Upon learning that her bank accounts had been frozen and her assets seized, Henyard became irate. She immediately attempted to persuade the Board of Trustees to lift the restrictions on her defense. Tiffany argued that the freeze wasn't just an effort to stop her. It was an attempt to halt all essential services in the community. "You think it's just a way to stop Tiffany Henyard," she claimed, her voice defensive. "It's a way to stop the services here in Dolton Township." However, her transparent attempt to deflect attention from her blatant wrongdoing did not go unnoticed. Many residents and officials saw through her words, recognizing them as a desperate attempt to avoid facing the consequences of her actions. This was the same woman who had used taxpayer money to fund lavish vacations, spent an astounding $443,000 on Amazon in a single day, paid police officers excessive overtime, and squandered millions of dollars on personal security, while the residents of Dolton struggled to make ends meet now, after being exposed for her extravagant misuse of public funds. Tiffany suddenly claimed to be concerned about the very services she had effectively crippled with her greed. This contradiction left many residents and community members incredulous. How could someone who had shown such blatant disregard for Dolton's well-being now, when faced with the consequences of her actions, suddenly care about the services she had undermined by using the town's resources for her gain? Tiffany had failed to consider the needs of Dolton's residents when she decided to steal from them, rather than reinvest the town's funds to improve the community. She used it for her lavish lifestyle. Now that her bank accounts and the town's finances were being locked down by federal authorities, Tiffany was forced to face the consequences of her actions. The federal investigation revealed that the millions of dollars sitting in her accounts were never meant to be hers. Dolton's residents were determined to get that money back. The financial damage Tiffany had caused was staggering, and for the first time, the town began to see a glimmer of hope that justice might finally prevail. Opinions within the community were divided on the best course of action. Some residents even went so far as to call for the disbanding of the police department, which they believe had been manipulated and used by Tiffany during her time in office. Others argued that beyond the prison sentence Tiffany was likely facing, she should also be required to reimburse all the public and municipal funds she had unlawfully used for her benefit. The anger within Dolton was palpable. Many felt deeply betrayed by someone they had trusted to manage the town's resources. Tiffany's misconduct had not only harmed the financial stability of Dolton, but also undermined the integrity of the local institutions. The fact that the community had to resort to measures like a credit card spending freeze to prevent further damage only highlighted the scale of her deceit. As for Tiffany's fate, the overwhelming sentiment among Dolton's residents was that she should be held fully accountable for her actions. This accountability would require both criminal prosecution and reimbursement of the stolen funds. Her actions were seen as a direct betrayal of the public trust, and many felt that only the harshest punishment would suffice. The idea of her accounts being frozen and her assets seized was seen as a necessary step to prevent her from benefiting further from her crimes and to ensure that she faced the consequences of her lavish spending spree funded by stolen taxpayer money. The question now on everyone's mind was whether Tiffany would continue to evade justice for much longer, or if the federal authorities would move quickly to ensure she could no longer exploit her position of power. The clock was ticking, and Dolton's residents anxiously awaited the day when Tiffany Henyard would finally be held fully accountable for her actions. Many believed that not only should she face time in prison for her financial crimes, but her assets should also be taken away to help pay back the harm she had caused to the town. There was no sympathy left for Tiffany, especially given the vast amounts of money she had squandered while the people of Dolton suffered. Her sudden pleas for concern about the town's services only added fuel to the fire. This was the same person who had shown no concern for Dolton's needs when she was using taxpayer money to live a life of luxury, and now she dared to claim to care about the services she had crippled with her greed. The community was resolute in their demand for justice.